For both of you, how y'all doing this evening?
Oh, we're doing amazing. It is, I heard it was Howard Homecoming. We got some HU folks in the building at all. HU? HU? There it is.
So that's what I had to do to get y'all to respond like that.
Yeah,
Okay. I noted.
Yeah. So we are at home. You know, I'm excited to be here.
Man.
Blessed and highly favored. Blessed and highly favored to be here with y'all tonight. Let's have fun. Let's have fun.
What y'all sipping on right now?
So we are sipping on the Michael Lavelle Iris Rosé 2021 vintage. Very delicious.
I have to say, I did know that, so I was leading the witness. I had some earlier and I had some last night, and I'm a rosé snob. Everyone on my team knows it.
He is.
And it's delicious.
So y'all, that really means a lot to us because he really does love rosé, and he really pulled out a sheet of paper and checked certain boxes. You know, he went in let me really taste it. Let me look into it. He critiqued it. He really critiqued it.
Well, fellas, you know, we love to kind of start these conversations learning more about your background and how you got to where you are right now. And I know that you guys are very early on in your journey, but you've learned so much already that I think will be super valuable to our audience here tonight. We've also already had folks that came up to me and said, I'm interested in the wine business. I came here because I want to hear from these two brothers. So, you know, as you're up here, think about that, right? We're sharing stories to empower one another. So I want to start with y'all's upbringing, late 80s. I know both of you are from Chicago.
You're talking about Brandon, right? You said late 80s.
I'm sorry. One of you is from Chicago. Apologies. So let's start with you growing up in Chicago. What was that like?
It's Chicago, you know. Chicago is one of the best cities in the world. It is a very strong black city, a lot of black community. You know, one of my favorite things that I always say, the Great Migration, the bulk of that went to Chicago. So you have a lot of black culture, a lot of black history within that one city, a lot of different people that look alike and don't look alike, but that can share a lot of culture together. So being raised in Chicago, it was the best thing in my life. You know, I say that and going to Howard. You see so much, and not all good. You see some bad. You see some struggles. And that struggle that you see in Chicago, it helps make you stronger. Chicago is a city where you have to succeed. There's a Chicago mentality. And if you don't do things the right way, if you don't go out and hustle, if you don't go out and make it happen, because nothing's given to you in Chicago. My mom, she's a retired Chicago police officer in Chicago. When she first started, I think I was 8 years old, she worked in Inglewood. My dad is a retired principal, 24 years, Chicago public school. So I saw a lot of the service aspects of giving back to the community, but specifically the black community in Chicago. And while seeing that and having those parents that were really going and giving so much of themselves to the black community, I also saw a lot of hustling. So many of my cousins.
I was going to ask you, I was like, what was your exposure to maybe business and some of that stuff? But it seemed like it was, it was more on the hustling side, which is still some of those skill sets translate.
I have an auntie that did hair. She was a beautician for 30 years. Wow. And seeing her every day says grind and hustle and be able to relate and build relationships again with our community. It shows you how to get stuff done. It shows you how to get your hands dirty. You know, I didn't grow up, neither of my parents. My father is the first person in my family to go to college. First person in my family to get a degree. My mom was the first person on her side of the family to get an AA. So I didn't grow up with parents in corporate America. I didn't grow up with parents with money. You know, they're servants to the community. But my family was good. You know, we provided. We took care of each other. And again, a lot of that was from hustlers. I didn't even realize this until I got older. My grandma used to manage a bar, a pool hall. So, you know, everybody in D.C. that knows me, they know me because I threw parties. And then as I get older and I started hearing more of these stories about my wild grandma being in these places, I'm like, oh, this is why I be in the club.
That was a part of this. Right.
Carrie Barnum, you put this inside of me. So, a lot of the hustling, you get a lot of hustle. You just got to make it work. You got to go and provide for your family and do right by people.
Absolutely. Terrence, how about you?
My upbringing, I had a lot of fun, right? My family did the best to protect me and keep me out of trouble, regardless of whether or not I found it. Curiosity leads you into some interesting places. Brandon talks about the Great Migration. My grandparents, I was raised by my grandparents.
Okay.
And so my grandfather was a postman, CPD, police officer, worked his way up to lieutenant. So I learned a lot about discipline and committing to something, an ideal from him. My grandmother pressed upon us education. So she was the first person in our family to get her master's.
Wow.
She was a special ed coordinator for Chicago Public Schools. So one thing that I think, when I think about my makeup, I didn't go to school in my immediate neighborhood. So I grew up in
How come?
So if you know anything about the Chicago school system, you want to get in a little early. You got to kind of make up your age, right? So you want to get into the right school, things like that.
Right system.
The black women were always looking out. I'll say that, right? And so I didn't go to school in my immediate neighborhood. What this allowed me to do was they operate as two different hemispheres. I went to school in a predominantly white neighborhood. I lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. It's Wild Hunters, South Side Chicago. It forced me to be South Side. Forced me to be very self-aware at an early age, right? Answer a lot of questions about myself, but also relationship building skills, right? And so when he talks about Chicago, I think about the Pullman Porters. I think about such a rich legacy of entrepreneurship, and not just hustlers, but real businessmen that own business, women and businesswomen that owned and prospered in the south and west sides of Chicago. My father was the first man to teach me the word entrepreneur.
Really?
I can't say I knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
When he was telling me to, but I always had access.
What was the example of him bringing that up to you? Was it just like going to different businesses and places like that, and him like showing you like, hey son, this is so you own this?
So he to this day he calls me 2.0. But I think it's because he watched my grandfather and his work ethic, right? So you get your 9 to 5, you do your steady employment, but then you grow, right? You provide value outside of your 9 to 5, and that was always his focus. So my father is a network engineer by trade.
Okay.
But outside of that, he would own an IT consulting business. He owned a trucking company. He got into real estate with a couple of his boys. And this is kind of what fueled my service-mindedness when it comes to creating business, right? Value-centric business models, where it's not just us, how we can benefit, how can we provide value to everyone in this room?
Community, right?
One to many versus a selfish approach to entrepreneurship.
Wow. So both of you have grown up there. Did you know each other growing up?
We met at Howard University. But the connection that Terrence and I have, you would think that we've known each other since we were 2 months old.
That's crazy though. Like it's crazy how you end up gravitating towards the people that you're supposed to meet. So tell me how y'all ended up meeting at Howard.
Yeah, so Brandon was actually my first boss.
Your first boss?
Yeah, he was my first boss.
Oh boy. He must have been pretty decent because y'all still hanging out together.
Yeah, he was all right. Don't do that. But so when I first got to Howard, I was young, right? I needed to make some money, and Brandon and another friend of ours, Joel, they were running parties and promotions throughout D.C. My friends and I were throwing house parties and whatnot, just to scrap, right, just to make some ends. And he kind of tapped me one day and said, I think I got a better opportunity for you. And so this was kind of my first opportunity within hospitality, within within the liquor and spirits business. And so this is kind of where we met. Brandon used to be the doorman. He used to charge guys $40, right? That was his thing. He used to tell you couldn't get in. I was responsible for bringing people, right? Connecting individuals, really uniting folks and getting them in the club so they can drink.
Now,
I gotta ask y'all. I'm gonna ask y'all.
Yeah.
I was drinking interesting things in college, and I gotta imagine that y'all's palates at that time were not as refined as they might be tonight.
So look.
So I gotta ask y'all.
Look.
Y'all was over there drinking Hypnotic, and y'all was drinking Super Hulk, and y'all was For a loco, you was, I know.
Listen.
No. Four Loko was a DC thing. Like at Howard, you were going to the store and drinking a Four Loko. Now, let me tell you.
No one should drink for a loco.
It should be illegal.
There's a good 3 to 4 months of my life that I don't remember because of Four Loko. I firmly believe that we will be sitting on the couch 30 years from now and see an infomercial that says, "Did you drink Four Loko? You might be entitled to a settlement." It's definitely coming.
Oh my God.
No, you brought up a really good point. We definitely in DC is a drinking city in general. It's an entertaining city. We like to have fun. We like to party. We like to do all of that. And you definitely try a lot of different things. My drink of choice was a French Connection.
Okay. He's bougie.
He bougie.
Hennessy and Grand Marnier.
Wow.
And when I say I had no business in the world drinking that at that young age, you drink one of those in your night. You talking
That's
about
what
3
I'm
months you
saying.
don't remember.
Yeah. Mine was boxed wine. that was my. I didn't always have the palate that I have. It was, that's kind of what led to that curiosity. Really, you get what you can afford. Like let's be honest about it.
Did you think it was fancy at the time?
At the time, yeah, because everybody else is drinking all that hard liquor. I'm walking around with my wine. Like that was our thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was boxed wine. I'm not ashamed to say it.
Hey, I'm not mad at you. We all gotta,
I may or may not have ice in it too. If you really want.
Hey,
I know
a couple people that still rock
I
with
didn't
the
know
ice
any
and,
better, right? Like that's just
pick your
that is
poison.
how you enjoy it. Enjoy how you in the
To each his
beginning
own.
until you know better. Until somebody you know better. Enjoy it how you enjoy it. Yes.
He had some box wine last night, y'all. don't let him fool y'all.
Now take me back to school for a little bit. What did each of you go to school for? What did you major in? What did you want to do? Was it you thought you wanted to go ahead and start businesses, or was your plan to kind of go into corporate and go that route?
So I can take a step back. Jeremiah A. Wright was who used to be the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ on the south side of Chicago, was one of my biggest influences for going to Howard University. I'd never heard a man speak so eloquently about blackness, speak so profoundly about black history. Just again, mentioning how I went to predominantly white schools, right? And counselors at that time, not really advocating for HBCUs. So here I am seeing this man that's larger than life talk about all the great talent that's coming out of DC. I'm like, I'm going there, right? But he would also talk about all the world changers, the leaders, right, that came out of there. And so I thought that I wanted to be a lobbyist, a politician. Wow. So I majored in economics, right? Wow. So we can talk about supply and demand, macro, micro, world economics, how you want. And I've always been interested in how psychology and sociology tied into business, right? Okay. It humanizes business. So that was my thing.
That was your thing.
That was my thing.
What about you?
So my answer is not as profound as Terrence's.
You went on a journey.
As a child, I remember dressing up wearing suits all the time. In high school, I had on ties and shirts, and everybody like, "Who are you? 40 already?
Where were you going?
Where are you going?" I had a briefcase at one point. And
wait,
I don't know.
You thought you was a businessman.
I thought I was a businessman.
About my business.
And I loved to have really good debates with people. And people would say, "You would be a great lawyer." So I said, "You know what? I'm going to be a lawyer." Then I started doing more stuff. And I said, "No, I love sports. I want to be a sports agent." So I went to Howard, and I was Howard's first class for their sports management program.
Wow.
And that was great. And my first law class, sports law, Professor Hyde, amazing class, probably the only class I remember at Howard. And through that process, I very quickly realized I do not want to be a lawyer. I don't want to take the bar. I don't want to do any of that. But I still have my interest and passion in hospitality. I still have my interest and passion in sports.
Okay.
So
not in debating people.
Not in debating people, not any of that. No, I
definitely in debating people.
I like to debate Terrence every day. So sports management, leisure studies was my major at Howard University.
Right. And so what did you end up doing with that?
I worked for the Wizards for a little bit, and then I went to the Washington Nationals, and I worked in their front office for about 5 seasons. And then after that, I went more to the restaurant side of things and became a restaurant consultant and operations manager of Grubhub. Hospitality is very big to me. I want a hospitality group. We will have a hospitality group one day.
I love that. Put
So
that in there. Put that in the
that's it.
universe. How about you, though? So you wanted to be a lobbyist. What did you end up getting into before we started getting into the wine business?
So I wanted to be a lobbyist, and I needed a job. And so I would go door to door selling POS systems to different restaurants, and it was one of the most brutal things that I've ever done. One, I'm selling you something you already have. All right,
And so you're trying to convince them to convert to
convert
yours.
to this wild, ridiculous ideology. Now that I think about it, but it was foundational for me in my tech sales career, and so from there, I've worked for several different Fortune 500 companies. Some that you may recognize is IBM, and latter being LinkedIn. What I learned about myself is that I would show up in spaces, and sometimes you shrink in certain spaces like that.
Tell me more about that.
Well, everybody knows about code switching.
Correct.
Right? That's no mystery. We all do it subconsciously sometimes. And again, me being a hyper-aware individual, I remember telling my wife one day that I'm not really happy, doing this. We make a lot of money, things are going great, but I'm finding it a struggle to flip my
I'm kinda
laptop
miserable
on right
doing
now.
this,
Like kind
right.
of, if I have to, step into a space and talk to you about one more person about golf, like that's not my thing, right? And no disrespect to anybody who really is passionate about golf.
No disrespect means all of the disrespect.
But if I ever found myself,
All of it.
yeah. But if I ever found myself having to change or my voice gets a little
Right.
higher, this might not be the space for me.
Right.
And I always wanted to be closer to purposeful work. So I remember one day I was on LinkedIn and got a response from someone from LinkedIn. And what I always tell people about that aspect of work is if I'm able to connect someone to opportunity, that's purposeful for me. So what I do when my life isn't consumed with Michael Lavelle, is I help companies brand themselves, connect with individuals who have the talents and resources that they need. So basically, I make governments more attractive. And so if I can help one parent, one single mother, one father match with an opportunity that can improve their household and life, that's purposeful work for me. And that's really, the gist
journey
of
that
the
you went
journey
on.
that I've been on.
I resonate with that quite a bit, right? I think we've all been in certain environments where we felt like, man, this really ain't me.
It's not.
It really doesn't feel right.
I don't care what that offer letter says, man. It's 90 days in, 120 days in, you're like,
Dog, I can't do
they're
it.
not paying me enough. To be quite honest, to be,
To deal with this,
to deal with that,
and
right?
not be myself.
And not be myself. And everything we
lot.
do is from a place of authenticity, right? You see us up here, like this now, and I know we'll talk about it, but at one point we would talk to distributors, we'd have a suit and tie on. I'm like, who are we doing this for?
Right? You're like, this ain't how we show up.
This not how we show up, right? Like, and it doesn't change my knowledge and understanding of the business. So you see us, he's got some great shoes. I'm gonna get those
love
later
it.
today. But then, we show up as ourselves authentically.
No, and that's a big thing of mine. I got some friends here that they get on me about this, but a long time ago I switched to a uniform. So you saw me yesterday. What was I wearing? This.
So the interesting thing, I have no judgment because everybody knows me knows I have a Michael Lavelle uniform.
I like that.
I wear black jeans. I wear my Jordan 1s, my Michael Lavelle T-shirt,
You
like
gotta
the one I
rep.
have on, and a Michael Lavelle hoodie.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
It's and it's about that authenticity part, right? I got to show up as who I am wherever I go, and if I'm not, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Why are we doing it?
Yeah. You should never
who we
have
trying to do this for?
You should never have to shrink for opportunity. You should always
Absolutely
be
not.
increasing.
One of the things I wanted to also chat with you a little bit about before we get more into the origin story of the business was at a young age you also you had a kid, right? And so that was another thing that you had to navigate.
It's a busy young man.
Yeah. I had my daughter Cassidy when I was in high school, 16 years old, and so part of that whole story of me wearing a suit and the briefcase and everything, because I had to be a lot growner and older at a younger age because my responsibilities were a lot different than a lot of my peers. Hell, even some of my family members, older family members. My brother, who is 8 years older than me, we had our daughters the same year. My niece was born in February. My daughter's born in November. So that also was a very big push to go and have to be more responsible, have to go and hold myself accountable. Blessed to be held accountable by my family and friends. You know, Terrence held me accountable a few different times of things. So when Terrence says that I was his first boss, I had to work. You know,
So
I was
when
in
you came to school, you were like, I actually have to provide for my daughter.
my first party at Howard. This thing called freshman week.
Okay.
Before I got on Howard's campus, I already had a party. Republic Garden on U Street, and it was great because I needed to provide.
They know.
Republic Gardens. At one point, I throwing parties, worked at Target, worked at PNC Bank, and worked at Sunglass Hut.
Come on, man.
All at the same time while going to school still. So that definitely has been a blessing for me to mature in different ways and get different perspectives of life, good and bad. And the bad has always taught a lesson to be a better man and a better father.
Wow. So you've been navigating a lot on this journey, safe to say. And you've taken this passion for hospitality and this passion for community, and you started to pull it into a direction. So tell me, how do we get into the wine business? Because I don't think it's any surprise to me to tell y'all I don't see a lot of us in this industry. So how do you decide, hey, we want to explore this?
I really want Terrence to answer this question, but before he does, I'm gonna give a quote, a fact, some data that he shares a lot. Less than 1% of winemakers are black. So when you say there's not a lot, that's an understatement. So, you know, for what Terrence and our partner Aaron did to create Michael Lavelle, I always look at them in awe to say, wow, the fact that you all had this idea is amazing. That's crystallized into more than a dream.
Wow.
So let's go back to the box wine. All right.
Okay.
I didn't have more of an understanding of wine at that time, but I could name several different cognacs, several different tequilas, several different vodkas to you. But I couldn't give you worldly knowledge about wine. As we got deeper into this space, we began to ask more questions. Well, why does it taste like this? Why doesn't this space carry that wine? Why is the quality or experience here differ so much as I travel, whether it's good or bad? Sometimes you're met with a certain amount of pretentiousness when it comes to wine. When you get to Michelin star restaurants, that should be an experience. You should leave there informed, but sometimes SOMs can do a little bit of gatekeeping, right? You can feel judged by not knowing.
Because you don't know.
Because you don't know. And ever since then, Aaron, Michael Code, my name is Terrence Lavelle Lowe, we decided that legacy in wine was the direction that we were going to go in. We wanted to create a label that you could look like us, talk like us, that was inclusive of everyone, right? If you know anything about the wine business, it is very antiquated. It's predominantly white, predominantly male, right? And so we wanted to create something that, from the jump, everyone, no matter what your walk of life is, what you look like, it is inclusive of all. And so we set out to do a meal.
Come on now. So when you started this journey, right? So obviously you had these experiences at the restaurant and whatnot. When did you start to get a more of an understanding of how the wine was made? And because for the most part, we might see labels and things like that, and we casual consumer don't really know the difference, right? So what pushes you all to go further and think like, oh, we actually want to go figure out how to make this?
Well, mistakes, really. I mean, and really because wine is of the earth, so we can start there, right? Really good wines. There's no formula for wine. There's a methodology. There's a science behind it. And once you start to understand that there's hundreds of different rosés in this category, you want to understand, well, how can I get mine to shine and stand out amongst those, right? Even looking at Zinfandel, back in the day, my grandmother used to drink white Zinfandel. That was her thing.
Yep.
But a lot of people don't know the history behind Zinfandel. So we look at that and say, how can we give it its just due, right? How can we give you the experience and knowledge to enjoy Zinfandel in its purest form and educate you from that standpoint?
I also think representation was very big for us. Again, going back to that stat, less than 1% of winemakers are black. So knowing that we have to learn. We can't just have this thing, because if we have it, how do we go and share this experience? How do we educate people? How do we continue it? How do we help the people that are coming? Back to what Terrence said with legacy, how do we build a legacy on this if we aren't doing the hard work to it? So that's where the challenge to really push ourselves and say, hey, how deep in this can we get?
Yeah.
And with any entrepreneur, you need to know every nut and bolt of your business.
Right, absolutely. You
Right.
got to know what's going on.
You got to know
if
what's
you want
going
to stay
on,
in business.
right? I mean, there's a lot of things that, allow you to create and not be a part of it, right? But when something goes wrong, you can't fix it. You can't speak to it. And I would say that since the journey of this, we've had so many different scenarios where we've been forced to integrate and understand what makes our business successful. We couldn't leave that to somebody else to take care of, because that's not a responsible entrepreneur.
Yeah. So tell me about what was the first wine that y'all decided to make? What was that first wine?
Our first wine was the Iris Rosé. The Michael Lavelle Iris Rosé was the first. We knew that we wanted a wine that was different. It was not something that most people would expect. So most people, when you think of your first wine, you think of a red, you think of a white. We wanted something that could go and attract the demographic, our base demographic, that we were positioning ourselves to go and connect with.
What was that journey like, right? Because I'm guessing y'all didn't have any winemaking experience when you're making these first cases. So how'd you go about that? Did you go partner with a vineyard? Like, tell me about that journey.
Yeah, so exactly what we said. We don't have a vineyard. Our family didn't come from that. So we went and did a lot of research. We did a lot of research intentional to find vintner partners that we could build with, that would allow us to go and have our creative freedom, that would allow us to learn, but most importantly, that would teach us along the way. So trust was a big part. We know what our opportunities are. We have the black and whites to what we can and do what we can't, and we need that guidance. One of the things we always say, it's a very lonely industry. So it's not like we could pick up the phone and call.
Because there aren't folks that look like us.
Not anybody look like us. And the ones that do look like us, they didn't know who Terrence and Brandon were yet. So we couldn't get on the phone and call them. So we had to find a vintner partner that, again, allowed us to go and really learn and do things to the way that we wanted it, from a taste profile to consistency to blending to a lot of different factors.
And how did y'all go about finding? Were y'all just cold calling people?
It's just a lot of cold calling. It's a lot of nights drinking to find the right partnership. But it's also years in the making. Because what you got to understand about this is, when you look at that is a year in the making, right? We're in the agricultural business. It's an agricultural product. And so it takes time to arrive at that finished product, right? And we're not even talking about aging or anything like that. Literally just the harvest of it all, right? Then the crushing and pressing of it, then the fermentation and the clarification, and then the aging and bottling, and all that happens before it hits shelves. And you've got to have a distributor relationship to even get on shelves, right? So there's just so many different steps that every time, you mind if I tell the story?
No, please.
So we had no idea how to get wine on shelves. We literally would walk in the stores and say, "You want to buy this wine?" And they would say, "Well, you got to have a distributor." And we're like, "Well, what is a distributor?" I can't just leave this
So
here.
you couldn't go to them and be like, "Hey, put this on your shelf."
The United States of America operates on a 3-tier system. So and there are different nuances per state, but let's just say largely operates on a 3-tier system, which means that somebody there's a channel that my product has to go through before it hits shelves, right? And so a lot of times that is you pitching yourself to these middlemen so that they can invest in you.
Right. And coming from a place where you don't have the experience or the specific, heritage in the industry, as you will. And plus you don't look like the white men that they do business with.
You're these young black men with, at this point, Terrence might have a little afro. I had my little curly, little curls, Jerry curl, somewhat braid. Who are these two brothers? Man, get out of here.
Goodness. So So that's one of your initial hurdles, right? But also it's in the process too, right? Because you're making this first case. Did you like how did that come out? And you're working with you find your first partner. How was it working with your first partnership from a winemaking standpoint?
So it was insightful. I want to say that in the very beginning, this is something that Aaron and I had held close to the chest. We didn't tell anybody that this is what we were going to do, right? We never announced that we were going to launch a wine company. But certain things, I mean, COVID happened, right? We
Right.
weren't able to fly and check on things as much as possible. We experienced the product, we saw a process, and kind of when I talk about the whole process, it takes months before it is actually finished. So, come 2020, I think it's around February, March, things are ready to go, and we had the intention to launch on Juneteenth of 2020, right? This is a symbol, if you know about liberation of black folk, for this was our liberation from the wine industry, right? This was us coming and saying that we have something to say. And what was most critical about that partnership is that we wanted to be direct to consumer. So because we did not have distributors, I got to get to your doorstep. I got to get you to experience this, right? And
so you got to figure out how to get in front of us.
I remember conversations with Aaron where we would say, "Hey, I just hope we sell 5 bottles," because no one has ever at this point. No one has not heard. They hadn't heard of this idea.
Hadn't heard
they didn't
a
know
single thing about what y'all been doing,
thing.
right? You're not teasing stuff on Instagram.
You don't know what's coming your way, right? And so we launched on Juneteenth, and by the end of the month, we had sold hundreds of bottles, right? From an eye, and it was so affirming in that moment that we actually have some. Then you got repeat orders that come in, right? And so you just talk about the early stages. It was just about finding the right partner and understand, hey, we're getting ready to do something. One, they didn't have a direct-to-consumer arm, so we changed their whole business model.
The partner that you were working
partner,
with.
right?
Okay.
We changed their whole model. They didn't know. They were hyper local to Napa at the time. And so here we are coming in trying to get them to do more work. And luckily they believed in it. We were able to make something happen.
Wow. So now tell me on this journey, it can't all go smooth, right? Like, along the way, you got to run into some even more hurdles in the process of just like the business side of things and dealing with people. Brandon, sound like you got something to get off your chest.
Oh, no. That first partner, I always say that we're blessed to have had them because we had those challenges, and those challenges made us better. That's one of my key philosophies. How do you become better? If you're at a 7, let's get to a 7.2. And our first vintage, we had to look in the mirror and have a conversation with ourselves and say, hey, is this what we want the community to have? Does this meet our standard? And we had to make certain decisions to change it and revamp it and make it better. And at that point, we were building trust with a partner who betrayed our trust.
How so?
We had this new vintage, then we took a lot of time. Our partner Devin, who is a Som, he went and did spend a lot of time there to really go and get this. Again, we knew the changes that we wanted. We were very intentional about that. So we went and made these changes. And the new vintage of our rosé in our minds was impeccable. And at this point, we're still young. We're still small. We don't have a boatload of money. We're self-funded. We're taking everything out of our pockets. And we have to do things logistically a certain way. We're piecing things together. So now when we make wine, we may go and say, hey, let's go and do X amount of gallons, and this gallons is going to last us for the year. We're going to bottle everything right now. We're going to label everything right now, and it's done. We weren't able to do that then. So we were going and saying, hey, we made 900 gallons of wine, but we can't bottle all 900 right now. All we could do was just get the fruit and make it. So what we're going to do, we're going to bottle a third of that.
Okay.
300. We're going to keep the 600 there. You all hold on to it. We get to the point where we need that last 300, and Terrence and I were in Georgia for this amazing Black Wine Festival. Excited to showcase our wine to the Black community, the Black wine community. And we were moving the wine into a storage unit ourselves. We're very boots on the ground. We do everything ourselves. And some young brothers were outside, and they helped us move it in. And I said, hey, I'm going to give them some wine. I opened up a crate, get to a case. and I pull it out, and it was a different color.
So if you know anything about rosé, it comes in different colors.
Absolutely.
Right? And the color is an indication of quality. I want to dispel that rumor right out the gate, right? But at the time, ours was a very rose quartz, very transient in the light type of thing. When Brandon pulled that bottle out, I kept holding it up to the sun, holding it up
He's
to the
like,
ground.
I know
like,
this ain't right.
This ain't right, right? This isn't
Yeah.
what we were presented with. And Brandon actually,
I cried. I cried, and I called our vintner partner, and I say, hey, this is not my baby. At this point, I had quit my job.
So you
So
were
I
all the
was
way in. This
fully
is,
in there.
you know,
We were moving, like we had momentum. And I said, what is this? And we come to find out that they tapped into our inventory without telling us. And then instead of just communicating with us and saying, hey, blah, 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 they reblended it to try to go and say, oh, no, here's your third. I know my baby. I know what Devin's
you
work
can't
did.
just cover it up.
You can't cover this up.
Yeah.
And is that, and so that's not that's not a common thing. And also on your agreement, the agreement's like, don't touch that. Our product is our proprietary product. Don't touch that.
As Terrence said, this is an earthly product. So there becomes a lot of different things within this when it comes to blending and such, where there's gray areas.
Okay.
But that was a lesson learned. That was the first lesson from a business standpoint where we decided to go and say, hey, to Terrence's point earlier, we need to control every part of this business. So our way, instead of having those 2/3 sitting in your facility when I'm in Chicago and Terrence in New York selling, let's go and bottle all 100% of this. So at that point, even if it is in your warehouse, it is in your storage center, it's bottled, it's corked. You can't do anything to disrupt my business now. And we even went further. We went and said, hey, let's go get our own warehouses. Let's go and get our own fulfillment center.
Wow.
And that's when we truly started to learn the business. That's when it really got going on the compliance side of things and learning more about liquor license, alcohol license. That's when we learned about bond. That's when we learned about storage. That's when things got fun. We needed that.
You needed
happen.
that to get closer and really get into the weeds of the business. Now I gotta ask y'all, what y'all just said in my head sounded like money, 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 and money. So I have to ask, how are you funding that, right? Like, are y'all self-funding? Are you going out and asking friends and family for them to invest in the business? Like, how are y'all paying for this?
We have self-funded. Wow. We have self-funded. A mass majority of everything that we have done has come from the four of us out of our pockets, making a lot of sacrifices. And our families have also made sacrifices along with us. With four of us having good jobs at certain different points and savings accounts, we've gone and tapped into things. We've sold shares. We've done what we had to do because we all believed in Michael Lavelle, but most importantly ourselves. And when you see a community go and back that up, it makes you keep pushing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We have been very fortunate to create a profit-efficient business with the funds that we have. And it's not to say that we aren't approached by VCs all the time, right? But we are, in our minds, waiting for the right partner, right? It's not just about a sum of money. It's about a vision that you're tapping into. It's about the understanding the nuance of the wine and spirits business, right? And so, to this point, been super, super, super self-funded and blessed and fortunate because of that. But we are scaling into a point that when we do decide to bring someone on, it'll make sense for everyone involved.
Now, I got to ask you, what type of partner is that for you, right? When you think about who you would want to bring in, right? Who's that ideal person? Because, they might be in the room. So I'm just curious.
Well, one of the things, Terrence and I are very big on relationships. We think in business works. It succeeds or it does not succeed based off of the relationship. So we always say we want a strategic partner, someone that we can grow with, that we can go and build things together intentionally, strategically. Someone that is well-versed either in the wine business or business that can come to us and say, hey, you all have done an amazing job doing A, B, C, D, but you all have not done E, F, and G yet. And here's how we do this. Let's build this together. I'm not only invested in Michael Lavelle because I want to see a profit at the end of the day. I'm invested in all four of you all. I'm invested in the mission that you all have to educate the community. I'm invested into the vision and mission that you all have to bridge art and wine. I'm invested into the vision that you all have to increase representation, not only in wine, but hospitality. So finding the right strategic partners that we can really build with, not just for us, but again, the community.
Totally. Now, one of the things that y'all touched on a little bit was the name. Backstage, we talked a little bit about the Iris Collection, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, what's the story behind the Iris Collection? What does that mean to you all?
Absolutely. So the Iris Collection means everything to us. It is the first collection of Michael Lavelle wines. When you look at this bottle, what you're looking at is a rendition of the iris flower. And if you know anything about the iris flower, it represents royalty, represents softness. This was actually an ode to the women in our lives, right? Our mothers, our sisters, our aunts. It's also an ode to Iris Rideau, who is the first African-American woman of Creole descent to own and operate a winery in the United States.
I love that.
And so everything we do is from an educational format, and then recognizing that there are people who have laid, the road before us,
before you, right?
To get to where we are today. After that is our artist series, and so this is really what really lights me up, is because when you think of Michael Lavelle, I want you to think of the intersection between art and wine, right? Art and wine are both misunderstood. They're obscure, right? It's kind of the thing that a lot of people are interested in but don't know how to approach it. And so we want to spark the conversation around, different types of artistry, different types of varietals, and be that intersection for folks to consume in their experiences.
Man, I love that. I love that you're able to kind of bring those two things together, because they do relate, right? Like they're very similar in each other in the language and how they are expressed and how they are digested.
Well, for us, it's super important that the design and packaging matches the integrity and goodness inside the bottle. You think anything about retail psychology, there's about two things that matter most to people, right? It's that, can I afford it? For one, if I don't know anything about your brand, can I afford it? And am I attracted to it, right? And if I can pull you in that way, and for you to discover then how we connect with you, then we've done our job.
You've done your job, and that's the hardest part, is getting someone to be attracted to, especially if it's on the shelf, right? Like when you're not there, something else has to sell it.
Form of manifestation, he would go to stores and just put the bottle on shelves just to see how it stands out.
I love that.
Our partner Aaron did a magnificent job of designing the bottle. It's definitely a bottle that was intentional when he designed it. Minimalist. Consumers shop with their eyes. Most people, like Terrence said, you go and buy a bottle of wine. Most of these, you don't know these varietals. You don't know how to pronounce these varietals. Most people go and say, hey, I want to drink a red. They go to the red section. Which one looks the prettiest?
Is it sweet?
So we understood that. So I definitely say Aaron did a magnificent job of making that bottle art for itself.
Now, one thing I also wanted to ask y'all, and after this, I do want to have some questions from the audience, so I definitely hope y'all been taking notes, because I definitely want y'all to raise y'all hand and ask some questions here. Do you all think of yourselves as a Black-owned wine label, or do you think of yourselves as a wine label that is Black-owned? And if so, what's the difference?
We are a wine label. We are a premium luxury wine label that happens to be Black-owned. The most important thing to us is the quality of the juice, the standard of Michael Lavelle, and making sure that we are providing that standard for ourselves, our family, but most importantly, again, the community. So we're very proud to be a Black-owned company, very proud to be the youngest Black-owned wine label in the world right now. But we look at it and say, who's next? Who's behind us? And how do we continue to provide good quality juice?
Yeah. I gotta sit up for this one, because this is important. I think Black is synonymous with creativity. I think it is synonymous with luxury. I think it's synonymous with craftsmanship. When I walk into a room, one thing about me, if you don't know anything else, is that I am Black. Without any before
Say
I
that.
open my mouth.
Really?
Yeah. Right?
I didn't know that. Shoot.
And where I think there is opportunity is for our partners to realize that our products, we are not competing with other Black-owned brands. So that is, to me, when I hear Black-owned, I hear a box, and that this wine can and should be amongst its contemporaries, which is all of the wine business, right? When you label us and you put us on menus, it's in the black box. Or sometimes you'll call and say, hey, we've already got a black-owned brand. What? Why can't 2, 3, 4
Exist at the same
on that
time.
same menu? Why do we have to be swapped out, right, for something else? Or why, don't dare take them down and put us up, because that's
Right.
not expanding our community, and that's what we're about. So for me, the opportunity is for us to command more out of our retailers, right? Not just because we're black, but because it is good.
Because it's good. You have
Right.
to challenge and be like, no, we have to think about this differently. You wouldn't do the same if it was just a white label that came. You wouldn't say we got too many white labels.
Nobody ever says that. You can look at the menu and see 30 mediocre wines, and nobody ever asks, who made this, right? And so I want just to express that there's more than enough opportunity for all of us, and that I wear black with a badge of honor. But it is also because we happen to be black, right? That is not all the totality of the product.
Man, I love that, brothers. I
We're
love that.
blessed to have a lot of restaurant placements. A lot of, unfortunately, this is an unfortunate thing. A lot of times when you go to restaurants, you don't see a lot of black brands, black or brown brands on menus. And we are very blessed, and it was very strategic to have a very big emphasis on what they call on-premise accounts. And on-premise means you drink it on-premise, off-premise, you drink it off the premise, so, retailers. And one of the things that we do a lot of our restaurant partners, Michelin star partners, mom and pops, we'll go, and if we see that we are the only black or brown owned wine or even spirit on the menu, we'll go to the beverage director. We'll go to the owner and say, hey, thank you for supporting Michael Lavelle.
Have you heard of this?
Bring somebody else in the door
But
with you.
I see that you picked up the Zinfandel. You picked up the Rosé. I know a brand in New York, Lovely Wine. She makes an amazing white. I think that her wine would go very well on this menu. You're a New York restaurant. She would have a lot of support to come. And I think that conversation has to happen more. And not only, and I challenge everyone even here, not just us as owners, but as consumers. When we go to restaurants and we look at the menu and you don't see any black or brown owned brands, ask the question, why are there no black or brown owned products on this menu? This restaurant, most of your guests are black and brown. So I think that's also a very big part of proud of being a black owned brand. But again, a premium brand, that's with good juice.